So everyone, thank you again so much for attending our second episode of Adaptables, an online series from your friends at One Day Immersion. We are excited about this new endeavor. We wanted to continue to connect with you and bring the best and brightest in front of you, and hopefully, hear more about diverse voices and experiences to help you navigate your way, whether it's, through the last couple of years of university or you're early in your career. We want to make sure that that we're giving you a really broad, strategic, informative way of delivering, more tools for your career build, as we like to say. So I'm going to quickly introduce Lerone Annalique, who I met, almost 10 years ago when she was a graduate student at Columbia University. One thing led to the next. You know how you kind of meet people, you hear people talk about, broadening your network, really making that work for you and for others. Kept in touch. Lerone has moved from her career in the U.S. at iHeart Media. She's currently, I want to get this right, strategy and operations manager at Google. And she is also, I'm very proud to say, a One Day Immersion board member. She recruited Uzo for us, and so I thought it appropriate that she make the introduction. So Lerone, please take it away.
Thanks, Dolly. I have to first say it was very easy recruiting Uzo. So thank you, Uzo, for that. So thank you all for joining. I know there's a lot going on in the world these days. So I really appreciate you making the time to be here with us. As Dolly mentioned, I'm a very proud member of One Day Immersion's board. I think this November is going to be our 8th year of our flagship event. But we sort of wanted to create, other than the big one-day event that we have, we wanted to create Adaptable because we wanted to find a new way to sort of connect connect students with media executives and find a way to do it on an ongoing basis. So this is our second event. We hope to have these monthly, so please continue to join us with us. Uzo and I met about 8 years ago as students at Columbia at the MBA program. Uzo's always there to give me career advice. He's been a great friend, a great supporter. I think students and young professionals hear a lot about the need for mentorship, but there's also a really strong need for finding peers and people that will grow together with you in the industry, people that you can have them as a gut check, ask really stupid questions, ask them what their experience is. And Uzo's been really that kind of friend. And hopefully will continue to be in the future as our careers continue to grow. So without further ado, I want to introduce Uzo, a dear friend. He'll walk you through his sort of road or his career in the media and tech, from writing for business magazines, freelancing for ESPN, to leading operations for a nationwide media sales effort and leading YouTube's venture into local news. Uzo's pathway from journalist to startup founder has been up and down, roundabout, never easy to predict. He's learned a lot about how the business of media works, how technology has changed the industry, and most importantly, how things actually get done. So hopefully he'll be able to share some of the lessons with you.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Lerone. Thank you for having me. You've been a great friend as well, so I definitely appreciate the opportunity. I am going to try and share some slides. They're not extremely awesome, but they're just enough of a visual cue, I think, to help me and everyone else along the way. So let me just pull these up. All right. Everyone can see that, right? I don't hear any objections, so I'll assume that's a yes. Like Laurel said, my name is Uzo. I currently work on a startup of my own called Black Oak TV. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end and definitely try to leave more time to talk about that via questions. But as you said, I just want to kind of walk you all through my lessons in media, what I've learned, what I've seen. I think a lot of it is, hopefully the type of things that you all are learning about in the early starts or very beginnings of your career. And I just hope to share a few lessons that I've learned along the way as someone who has pretty much been in this industry all his life. So I could bore you with the beginning. Born in Virginia, early days in Maryland, grew up in Texas, went to college at Columbia as well. And as you learned, also ended up there for business school. And we'll talk about why I did that too. But I assume you don't want to hear that. So the one thing that I'll say about that, and especially how it relates to media as well, is that you always want to try to change your environment. And that doesn't necessarily mean location or, types of people, but it can really mean anything. And in my case, when it was moving from Texas to New York, kind of moving from the South to what is essentially the media capital of the world, I just had an entire perspective change. Growing up in the South, your perspectives, what you learn, even your values to some extent are different than what you may experience and learn and hold close to you when you're in New York City. And I think that change of perspective and having kind of that duality really helped me not only grow as a person, as a young person, 18, moving to New York City, but it also really helped me view the media in an interesting way. I think when you live in New York and you're around people who are in media, you're in the media bubble, it's very different from when you're someplace else. And so when you've had the experience of living outside of it, I think it just gives you the dual perspective of, understanding what entertainment and news and all of that really means from multiple points of view. So in college, I did a lot. I played football. I interned at MTV. I was a library assistant, and I also interned at a music label. And all of that turned into me actually ending up becoming a writer right after school. It was something that I always liked to do when I was in high school and middle school. I started writing for the school newspaper and the yearbook and things like that. And so when I came out of college, without any real writing experience in college, as you saw, I just started trying to do a lot. Like it was a time where self-publishing was really big, where people were, this is around 2006, and bloggers were becoming really popular. There was a big cult community of bloggers across the United States and beyond. And so you had everyone trying to become the next big blog, and blogs were getting bought and hired by newspapers, and entire newspapers were starting new blogging sections. It was a really interesting time in self-publishing and at a time where people still thought they could make money from it. So I started my own blog on Blogger. I started writing pieces on this old site called Associated Content. It says $5 an hour. It was $5 an article, which probably took me about an hour. So it really depends on how much I actually completed. But I wrote tons of those, and really it was just helping me not even really build up a portfolio, to be honest, because it was, so quick churn that it wasn't necessarily the most awesome of work, but it helped me get used to writing very fast and over again. And that repetition really helped me get better at it, so that when I took on larger assignments, I was much more refined at writing and was doing a lot better telling stories and also telling them quickly, which was a big thing back then, because especially around that time, folks were really in that mindset of, hey, you need to publish, 10 articles a day, like as an individual writer writing for a .com website. So that was a really big thing at that time. And that led to a job at Inc. magazine about, I'd say 7-8 months after I graduated. And so that was really great for me. I started writing for this small business magazine. I was working on a special project there where I interviewed dozens of companies for a report they were doing. So it was a really great time, and I got a lot of experience and really got to hone my craft as a writer. And so despite the fact that I didn't get any of that writing experience in college, I had to create it. And I think one of the things that as you start your media careers that you need to think about is really start trying a bunch of things and figure it out. Do something you love. You won't always know exactly what you want to do. Lerone and I went to business school with a bunch of people that on average were, 28, 29, 30 years old, and nobody there knew what they wanted to do except for, maybe a handful of people. And so I would venture to say it's okay if you don't know what you want to do, but just try a bunch of things. Hopefully you'll figure it out and find something you love, but don't kind of rest on your laurels trying to do the same thing over and over again. Again, in my case, I wrote a lot. I wrote for free. I wrote for very little. And ultimately, it came to be something that I found out that I loved and was able to find work doing professionally. So as in writing, I did a lot of freelancing. The Inc. magazine job didn't last forever. In fact, the time that we're talking about when I graduated, there were kind of two things going on there. One, newspapers and magazines were really getting disrupted. So everyone was moving online, and newspapers were starting to make a lot less money. Magazines were starting to make a lot less money. And so getting a job as a reporter on staff and things like that was extremely hard because there were just so many layoffs. And little did we know at that time, but we were also kind of leading up to the recession. So on top of the newspaper industry and magazine industry really struggling on its own, the recession helped kind of expedite those things. So, I ended up freelancing a great deal. Thankfully, all that writing experience was great, but it's not that awesome of a life. Like, it takes a really long time to become a full-fledged freelancer that's making a career out of it. And I tried as I might, but there was not a lot of money in that. So ultimately, I decided to leverage that freelancing opportunity into something else, which was great. So I ended up at ESPN Radio. So they had seen a bunch of stuff that I had written for sports. I had taken one or two freelance projects from them, and they decided to bring me on as someone who worked in their ESPN radio department. And that was really great. It was a full-time job. I got the experience of working at ESPN, where you get to see a bunch of awesome editorial people, reporters, news producers, directors, on-air talent, athletes. It was a really awesome learning experience for me. And I got it despite not having really any experience in radio. And the writing was a big part of that. They just wanted to see that people had the ability to formulate thoughts, put content together in kind of a story format. And that really carries over well to radio and really just about all mediums. But the two lessons I got, from having attained that job were, one, do your best no matter who's watching. So, I took like I mentioned, I took a couple of freelance jobs from ESPN before they gave me that full-time offer. And as a result of doing really well there, that's when they decided to actually bring me on full time. And so had I not done my best work for them, had they had just been another client that I was trying to turn out work for to get a couple of bucks, who knows if they would have actually ended up seeing what I was capable of. And then on the second front, learn the tools in the industry. So like I said, I didn't really have a ton of experience in radio, but one of the things that I had always played with in high school and to some degree in college was this software program called Pro Tools. And so I actually had experience using that, editing audio content. It was purely for fun. Me and my friends were making songs when I was growing up, and so I got to learn how to do that. And so when they asked me if I knew how to do that during the interview, I happened to, even though that was not something that I was aiming to use that for in any way, shape, or fashion. So I'd say that especially today, that there are so many different online tools, pieces of software, things like that are being used in media every day. And whether it's on the business side or the production side, I suggest learning those. And they don't take a ton. And you all are going to be much more digitally savvy than even my generation is. So I'm sure you're already used to a great deal of them. And in some ways, social media is the preeminent tool. But I suggest for the more professional things out there, it's worth taking a free course online or something like that every now and then if it's something that you think is of interest to you. You never know if it'll come into play later on, and that happens at places like Google and YouTube, where I came from, where all of a sudden they're using these tools that I didn't necessarily have experience in, and all of a sudden they're saying this is something we need to learn. So always try to learn what other people are using. So ESPN was great. They have an awesome cafeteria where you run into athletes and on-air talent all the time. You literally get to watch sports while you work. And I learned a lot about the business of sports and news. So while I was writing and producing radio and eventually got to do some TV and ESPN magazine work, I ultimately was just taking everything in, time and time again, learning, how assignments got made, what were the goals on ESPN.com, what did radio ratings look like, what did TV ratings look like, all of that stuff. The more you took it in, the more you learned about the business, the more I think it just helped me round out my interest in media and kind of pursuing a long-term career there. But sadly, I was not always in New York for this job. So while I was hired in New York, ESPN's headquarters is in Bristol. So I had to go to Bristol all the time to work out of their main headquarters a great deal. And I kept having to go back and forth. And as much as I loved working at ESPN, ESPN was very different from the city that it was in, Bristol. And it was really starting to get to me, missing out on everything that New York had to offer on a regular basis, and being in a city where I didn't necessarily have that many friends, just people that I worked with, which was great too, but it wasn't quite the same. But thankfully, the fact that all of my freelancing work had never really stopped. I was still able to, still allowed to write articles for other people and do some side work on the production side, helping people produce TV shows and things like that for sports. One of those freelancing opportunities turned into a gig into New York at CBS Sports, which is located in Manhattan. So I was able to get a job there as a production and research assistant, working on CBS Sports from their main studio in Manhattan, which is basically where they did all the pregame shows and halftime shows and any other kind of production they did around sports games. And so basically, I was in charge of helping the on-air talent get the information they needed, helping the producer get the information they needed, producing, smaller segments within the show that made up the entire show, and working throughout the week to make sure that not only the show was good to go, but that everyone across the country that was traveling to these games also had the information and things that they need to talk about during the year. And so the lesson that I kind of got from getting that opportunity was, one, find a way to enjoy being where the jobs are. So being in Bristol, again, was a great opportunity to be at ESPN. As I mentioned, I learned so much, but there weren't a lot of other opportunities in media there. And so, for me, I knew finding my way back to New York was going to make a lot of sense. And, I sit here today and we're in the middle of a pandemic and everybody's dialing in from home. And so remote work is going to certainly become more and more a part of the norm. But I still think there's going to be something in the media industry to being in New York or LA or other global media centers. And it's not going to be a requirement, but I think it helps. And I think it helps you, especially if you can find different ways to grow your network within these places. So that way, maybe you don't have to live there. So, if you live in New York for a period of time, or you just have a strong network there, you may not need to be there in order to leverage the network as much. But you certainly want to have a group of people there that are looking out for you, because you never know when you might change your interest within media. And then the second point here that I would say is just leverage your network every single time. So, to this point, every job that I mentioned, I got through Columbia somehow or some way. So with the job at the music label MTV, when I was the internships in college, I got those through Columbia Alumni or Columbia Job Board. Inc. Magazine was also through the Columbia Journalism School. ESPN was through a Columbia alum, and CBS Sports was through a Columbia alum. So, and it doesn't have to be your college. It doesn't have to be Columbia. It doesn't have to be anything like that you leverage in order to get these jobs. It can be old jobs you have. It can be hardworking friends, because they're surely to have a network that trusts them and their recommendations. It can be recreational sports. I've gotten business or jobs from friends that I just played basketball with on the weekend. So everywhere around you is an opportunity for the future. So I just say continue to build relationships no matter what environment you're in, because those things can lead into opportunities. And for me, really leveraging the friends and people that I had from college really did help me get every job that I had up until this point, and many jobs since. All right, so CBS was really great to me, but not everything was great. So, I did get to learn a ton about TV production. It's an extremely great network if you're interested in being in media. And of course, it brought me back to New York City. And it also gave me the opportunity to really take a a very strong approach to social media. So I was at CBS around 2008 to 2010, and this was kind of the kind of professionalism, the professional rise of Facebook and Twitter, like being adopted into businesses and especially media networks. And so when I was at CBS, we didn't even have a Twitter account for CBS Sports. And so they were like, all right, let's set one up. And so having that kind of early on experience at a time where no one was really an expert at any of those things yet was a really good learning experience for me and helped me get a lot of opportunities later in life that I might not have otherwise been. So take advantage of your youth. Oftentimes it'll mean that you get opportunities to lead things that aren't necessarily that important or that integral to a business at the time, but you never know when they will be that for the business that you work for. But I also had some trouble there, as I said. So my boss actually quit on the first day of my job, or at least he told me he was quitting the first day I got there. So that was a unwelcome surprise for me. I didn't get a promotion that I really wanted there at the end of my first year, so I had to rethink things there. And then, related to that, moving up in TV is actually very hard. So, people enjoy working in television. It's a great job, especially with sports. And so people don't leave those jobs. And so if you want to, become a producer or a director at a sports media company, you really have to, be in it for the long haul. And so that also meant that I had to think about what that meant for me in the trajectory of my career. So why didn't I get promoted? So one of the things that I like to think about, and this was early in my career that I wish someone had told me at the time, but in media and probably in life, it's not about what you did, it's about how you made people feel. So, if you think about everyone that's been successful in media, whether it's Disney or the NBC Universals of the world, or your favorite movies or your favorite actors, you don't necessarily remember exactly what they did, or even if you do, it's your relationship to what they did and how it made you feel that makes them stand out in your memory. And so in media, especially, when you're creating something for the masses, it's going to be about how you make the masses feel. But even at work internally, people are going to be kind of heavily biased towards how did you make them feel? What did your work do to impact them or the overall business? And so you really want to think about that. I don't think that was in the back of my mind at that time. I think I was just, really relying on being a smart person that worked really hard and not really thinking about, whether what I was doing was actually having impact on the people around me. So I definitely think that's something that applies to working in media businesses, probably all of them. Certainly applies to the rest of your life as well, too. So I decided to leave CBS, and ultimately I was always interested in entrepreneurship. So I started two small businesses on my own. One was a sports blog network and podcast called The Sports Watchers. And so I had a really fun time doing that. And then the other one was a nightlife blog and promotional service, which I had a lot of fun as well as a 20-something-year-old in New York. And both were really great times. I did not make a terrible amount of money doing these things. So they were not incredibly long-lived, but they gave me a lot of experience, seeing all sides of what it meant to run a quote-unquote media business, and whether that was making the content, getting advertisers, getting distribution, so getting people to see what I was making. Or on the nightlife blog side, I really tried to leverage social media and email, which was, again, relatively new as a marketing tool at the time. And so I was definitely trying to bring kind of my digital experiences to that business as well. Had it been up to me, those things would have lasted forever, but they didn't. And this is another great lesson in media, which is that timing is everything. I with the sports business in particular, the blog that was really successful was about fantasy sports. And I didn't realize this until I kind of knew it was the end, which was that I was kind of there in an interesting moment in time where fantasy sports hadn't been really professionalized by the ESPNs of the world. So there wasn't enough content out there, but it was coming. And so I was doing really well, getting traffic, getting eyeballs, being able to generate money against that. But then eventually when ESPN and others started doing more and more fantasy sports, they were churning out probably 50, 70 articles a day for their main site. And I was, turning out maybe 10 to 20 with the help of some freelance writers. And so it was just, not great timing to see ESPN ramping up there and then starting to kind of suck the traffic away from me. And there were other sites as well, too. And so that's where just timing is everything. And then with the promotional service, it was kind of the same thing. I was definitely really early to the space, getting people to come out to do actual events in person in 2009, 2010. It was really still a personal thing. Like, people were still doing that via word of mouth. We had email, social media. People weren't really trusting to go to places based on something they saw on a website alone or a Facebook post alone. This is a time where online dating was still very taboo for the most part. So people weren't as at the norm of taking online experiences and moving them offline. Again, pre like at least the full widespread exception of Airbnb, pre-Uber. This was before we were really bringing those online interactions to real life. And so I was a little bit too early there and really couldn't get the type of traction I was looking for there. So I decided to get another job ultimately, and it was during the recession. Or at least right after it had began, and I was trying to get a job in media. So looking for a job in media during a recession, not awesome. And I don't mean to scare anybody, since we're kind of in a recession now. You all are interested in media, but it is tough. It's a different prospect. Media places are kind of one of the first ones to think about hiring different. But there was a good end to the story, which is, I decided to change environments a little bit. So instead of saying, okay, I have to go back to writing or producing content, working in sports or news, I decided, what if I help other media companies kind of navigate this time? So I ended up working at a digital media agency called Morpheus Media. And on this end, now I got to be purely on the money side of media. So now I was no longer producing content. I was going more to the business side of it, which thankfully I had gotten some experience with the last side, which is why they were open to hiring me. And they actually put me in a division where I was in charge of trying to figure out how to help our clients get used to using the emerging digital tools out there. So the YouTubes, Facebooks, Instagrams of the world. I know it's hard to think some of those things as emerging, but at the time they definitely were. And I got to become an expert on those things, as well as, e-commerce as an aside was also something they assigned me to. And I got to really see, what it took to drive transactions online as well, too. And that's definitely been something that's been a helpful experience for me throughout my career as well. So this changing of environment, taking that lesson from before, was really helpful, and it allowed me to, really round out my experience in media, going from just the production side of things to now seeing the business side of things and helping other media businesses achieve their goals. And that experience actually enlightened me. It made me think, hey, here I am telling all these big businesses how to grow their media properties. These were literally executives, vice presidents, CEOs that I was talking to about launching these big, bold products. And they were asking me, who was like, 26, 27 at the time, how do I do this? And so I realized, I had this experience, it had some value, but I didn't necessarily have the managerial experience that they had. So that led to me, deciding, because I had this experience and the executives didn't, but I didn't have the executive experience that they had, I was going to try to kind of merge that knowledge and acquire what they had. So I decided that I wanted to be in media management. I wanted to work at places like YouTube, Netflix, NBC Universal, but I had really been, at the time, I was just a junior digital consultant who had written blogs for a good majority of his early career. So I was trying to figure out how to piece those things together. And one of the things that I definitely took up, and I recommend all of you take up, and the fact that you're here at something like this is great. And listening to folks like Evan and the like, I think that is a tremendous learning experience that you need to continue to take advantage of. But you also just need to read everything about your industry. Thankfully, there is no shortage of information out there. I just decided that's what I wanted to be. And so I started reading Variety and Hollywood Reporter, two of the biggest trade magazines in the industry, all the time, every day, every week, as much as possible. And that's taught me more about the industry than anything. Like, yeah, you have to experience this stuff, but there's so much reporting going out there. You learn so much of the terminology, what's important, strategy. I really, if you're not reading these things on a regular basis, I really recommend you do. You'll learn so much, and it's just free for the taking out there. To not take advantage of it is bad. And you'll see as you get into these jobs that a lot of your colleagues, certainly the ones that are excelling, they're reading these things. So I certainly would recommend you all get on it right now to kind of get that mental experience that you may not have quite yet. And the more I read that, the more I realized a lot of these folks went to business school to get in the industry. Not all of them, but a good portion of them. So it was enough to help me decide to go back to business school and really leverage that as another opportunity to grow my network so that I could get into those jobs at YouTube, Netflix, NBC, things like that. And that network worked out great again. So I went to business school, met a lot of awesome people, got a lot of experiences, learned a lot too, and ultimately was able to get a job at Google thereafter. And again, this was another instance where an alum of Columbia Business School made a recommendation for me there, and I was able to eventually get a job. It wasn't automatic. I probably interviewed about 6 or 7 times before I got it, but I did get in there eventually, and I was very thankful. So I got there though, and I wasn't necessarily doing what I wanted. So despite the fact that Columbia helped me get in and I was reading all these things and had all this, knowledge of it, I didn't have that actual experience of being on the management side of media. And so they really wanted to leverage me for, prior experiences, helping businesses grow, some of the e-commerce experience that I gained in the last job, and certainly kind of the business fundamentals that you learn in business school. And so they brought me there to work on products that I had not really worked on a great deal, but I knew enough about to be dangerous. And so ultimately, I got to go in and work on those products a long time. So Google Ad Manager, Google Ads, these are all things that Google uses to help companies promote themselves, make money, and I got to work on those, really hardcore with a lot of different businesses, many of them media businesses, and help them grow with Google. I also get to grow my network inside the company. So Google has a ton of internal groups and organizations. One of them that I was a part of was the Black Googler Network. It was a great opportunity to meet other Black Googlers, other people in tech, since they kind of collaborated across different events and opportunities. So that was a really great experience as well. And I got to I did a lot of volunteering, both on my own outside of work, but also internally, like volunteering for teams for free, especially teams that were doing awesome things. So when I say volunteering, just volunteering my time to teams that I didn't necessarily work on, try and help them with things so that I could get experience and also show them what I was capable of. And I kept on reading, just because I wasn't working, directly at the media portion of Google didn't mean that I was going to stop reading about it. And, again, there's just so much information out there. You can learn about everything and anything by reading those 2 prominent trades, along with tons of blogs and articles that are out there. So I never stop that. I really think that's a big part of my success to date. And then eventually I did get the job at YouTube, and a lot of it was predicated on the volunteering that I had done for different teams at YouTube. A lot of it was based on the fact that in the interview, I was able to answer questions that I had only read about, but I knew the answer from all that reading that I was doing, and ultimately was able to land a job there on their content partnerships team. And so I say all of that to say that it's always, you need to always have a goal and a plan. For me, when we think about it, I laid out when I was at Morpheus Media, I saw what executives were thinking. I saw my experience, and I decided what I wanted to do. And the fact that I knew that the combination of reading, leveraging those experiences at Morpheus Media, going to business school, growing the network, getting to meet the right people that would help me get into YouTube, all that was a part of a plan and for the ultimate goal that I had. And without that, I don't know that I would ended up there. And, you'll get different perspectives on this. Some folks will tell you, just work really hard and attach yourself to awesome people and the opportunities will come. And that is certainly true as well. But in some cases, if you don't pick where you want to be, it might be hard to grow and actually find those opportunities. And so for me, having some goal and some plan is important. And believe me, a lot of times I've had goals and plans and they don't work out, and something completely opposite and equally awesome ends up being the end result. But I still think having that goal and a plan helped me get to wherever I was going. And so I recommend you think about your career very strategically. I know, in the early days, it's hard to really think about that, especially if you're just mainly looking for a job and anything to do, but have a plan anyway. It doesn't take, it doesn't take any money to do that. It doesn't take, a ton of experience to do that. It just takes you mapping out, what you want to be and trying to figure out the best way to go there and attacking that and changing that every single day. And so YouTube was a great experience. I spent the last 3 or 4 years there. I worked with media and content companies and content creators. I negotiated tons of content deals. Specifically was helping people come on board to YouTube, or in some cases we were helping a lot of news companies experiment with different materials. So we were funding different experiences, studio building, as well as content development for them to try and do new things and grow as an organization on YouTube. And that was really great for me. My experience in news was, like I said, at the very beginning of my career. So to come full circle and be able to help news companies really navigate digital media, digital video, and try to figure out how they could make a business on YouTube was really great, and allowed me to meet some really great people as well. One regret I have is not making more progress there. I think I would, part of me was so happy to be there and learn so much. And, sometimes you get caught up in the day-to-day work of doing your job. And I think, again, it's somewhat specific to media. I'm sure it expands to other industries as well, but you always want to think about how can you make a splash? How can you do something unique, make a mark for yourself? I think that's very important with media. It's not to make it sound superficial, but you'll hear a lot of times that media is a hit-driven business, and that is true in both the relationship with consumers and having big, awesome movies and TV shows, but I think it also affects your career. If you're the person behind those big TV shows, the subscriber numbers going up at the New York Times, or the latest Disney movie, that's what people are going to look at you for. That's how they're going to view your career. And so having those things on your resume is very important. So, try not to just get caught up in the day-to-day stuff, but always make sure that you're looking for opportunities to do something impactful. And this really just kind of goes back to, the other lesson about how do you make people feel? And if you do something big and awesome, obviously that's going to have an impact on how people feel about you. That said, I definitely enjoyed my time there. Without it, I wouldn't have learned as much about content licensing as I do now, and that's a big part of what I'm doing in my new business. I wouldn't have had the startup network there. I didn't mention this, but this had me move out to San Francisco as well. So I really got in the middle of Silicon Valley and was able to attend a lot of cool events in venture capital and entrepreneurship and meet a lot of cool people there starting new and awesome businesses. And then just, the knowledge that I got about consumer viewing habits from being at YouTube and seeing how people were interacting with YouTube channels and all the data that we get being there. So I really informed how I see online streaming and online video. And that knowledge will always be at the back of my mind and really help me in making decisions for my own business. And speaking of my own business, it's called Black Oak TV. The idea is that we will make it easy for Black content lovers to find great Black stories that they want to watch. I just think there's a dearth of awesome Black content out there, and I want to make sure that there's a place where you can find it and see awesome Black stories. So that's what I'm working on today. We're at the very beginning stages, but like I said, all the things that I learned from creating awesome content to making thinking about how you make people feel, to the content licensing part, where now I'm working with a lot of producers and directors about funding their opportunities. All of that is going to carry over into the business that I'm starting today. And so that's why I'm thankful for all the experiences that I've had. And so my final lesson is, don't be afraid to quit. I think, especially someone who played football and and grew up in Texas playing football as well. You're always told to never quit and always pursue things. But sometimes you have to realize when it is time, in the hopes that you're going to come out stronger on the other side of quitting. So I'm, I definitely wouldn't say that I'm a quitter. And my football record in college was 8-32. So I didn't quit that and still stay with that all 4 years. So I'm definitely not a quitter, and you shouldn't be as well. But when it's right, make the move. And so for me, there was always a reason. For ESPN, I had an opportunity to leverage. I wanted to be in the media capital of the world. So that was my reason for leaving CBS. I wanted to learn quicker. It was too slow paced for me. The growth trajectory wasn't what I liked, so I moved out. The small businesses that I started, I figured out that they weren't at the right time, thankfully, and so I was able to move on to something else. Morpheus allowed me to, change environments, expand my thinking. Google got me into my dream company. YouTube got me, leaving YouTube got me to actually go on this mission of creating Black content. And so all of these were for good reasons. I never quit just because it was hard or anything like that, but because I thought there was a better opportunity for me on the other side of things. So that is my story, where I am today. And with that, I don't know how much time we have, but happy to answer questions.
Hi, Uzo. I'm Jana Henthorn.
Hello.
Hey. I'm the CEO of the Cable Center, and we've been a longtime supporter of ODI. So I always love the things that Dolly puts on. I'm really impressed with your goal and plan. I noticed one of the things that you did was you said you didn't get a promotion early on. I forget maybe was it ESPN?
CBS.
Yeah. CBS. Okay. How often do you expect to be promoted, and is that a reason? Is that a reason to move on, or talk to me about that, would you?
Yeah. So as I'm sure it obviously depends on the place. This happened to be a very structured part of CBS Sports where a certain percentage of the team was going to get promoted every single year, and so for me, it was like, if not this year, then you have to wait an entire another year for it to happen. So very structured in that situation. And that's why I thought about that. So I can't give a general number, at Google, it was different. And even at certain teams within Google, it was different. But I would say this, one, definitely check with your other peers, hopefully mentors that you have at the company, and they'll definitely give you an idea of like what you should be aiming for, to know that you're making headway there. And then two, I would also say I didn't leave solely because I didn't get the promotion, and I wouldn't recommend anybody else leave just because you didn't get promoted. It might just not be your timing. There's so many reasons why that can work out. As I kind of alluded to in that example, I didn't get that promotion, but then I looked around and said, for the long term, is this a place that I want to be? Do I want to take as long as it may take to get to the position I want to have? Do I even want to have that position? And once I started asking myself those questions, and perhaps not getting promotion, made me ask those things. But I got the answers back that helped me realize that it was time to move on. And so, definitely not advising anyone to, you don't get a promotion and quit, but it certainly is a time to reevaluate and say, hey, am I not getting a promotion because of, I just need to do better, or are there other longer term reasons that may be affecting my growth, and maybe I need to think about being someplace else that's better for where I want to be.
Gotcha. And I understand what you're saying. And what I've found is you can turn that experience around. So if you don't get a promotion, and if you go back in and ask the questions respectfully,
yeah,
you get all this information. And I really think it lines you up for the next promotion, because people will respect the fact that you came to them and said, hey, can you give me some more information on this? It's great,
yeah.
Great information seeking.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I always advise folks to get that feedback. I know it's something I've done. If I quit every time I didn't get a promotion, I would have had 27 jobs on those slides. But thankfully, it was just, one of those rare times where I thought about it.
Yeah, well, know when to hold them and when to fold them, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a good lesson. I should have written that one down.
Yeah. Oh, feel free to use it. Thanks for doing this for us.
No problem. I see a question. Maybe I'll just read it from the chat group. Uzo, aside from the magazines you mentioned, do you recommend any other reading material? Yes, so I mentioned Variety and Hollywood Reporter, so definitely start there. They probably do, the most breadth reporting on the media industry at large. There are others, smaller industries within media that you can read. So depending on what you're interested in, I would look out for those. If you're interested on being on the business side, I would definitely recommend reading for lack of a better term, I'll call him a blogger. I'm sure he would never call himself that, but Matthew Ball is like someone a lot of people in media read. He writes a great deal about media industry and really what it's going to look like over the next 10 to 20 years. So I think it's really great for young people to read that. And I would say another good source is I would subscribe to this newsletter called Cakeworks. They send out basically every worthwhile article about media that's been written over the past week. Comes out every Monday. So that's a really good email newsletter to sign up for. And it'll give you a bunch of articles from multiple sources every single week. All right. See another question. How often did you get promoted each position in the company? Again, it varies from company to company. Again, I would say it really depends on where you're working at. So, whenever I got to Google, I asked people, how long should it take? Whenever I was at ESPN, I asked people how long it should take. People are usually pretty forthright with that type of information, especially your boss should be. They shouldn't be afraid to tell you that. They're not going to guarantee it. They're probably going to give you a range instead of like an exact number, but that's really all you need to know. It's like, what are people generally kind of doing? And you're either going to try to aim to match that, beat that, whatever it is, it's going to be your own, personal decision, but you just want to have a good idea of what the expectations are and make your own decision from there. All right, next question from, I think also Arnold. When you worked in YouTube and out on the sports side, did you get trained on the job? So yeah, I guess was there training? Essentially, so for sports, yes, there was definitely training. It wasn't that rigor. Like they kind of expect you to know how to research and read information and data talking about sport. I guess it applies to sports and YouTube, but on the sports, media journalism side, a lot of it is kind of like these broad skills that, most of what you get throughout, going to high school and college, they're those basic skills. And then, yes, there's some on the job training about, how to write stories, which is really just coming from an editor, just, constantly critiquing your work, letting you know what you need to work on, things like that. But really, it's a lot of it came from repetition. All the freelance writing I did really paid off there. And at Google and YouTube, it's kind of the same thing. Like you have to come in with a certain skill set, and that's what they hire you based off of. But once you get in, there are certain things specific to the job that you have to learn. So there is on-the-job training. So depending on, exactly what your job is, for me, being in content partnerships, it was more about learning about the product itself, YouTube, and how it worked and all its nooks and crannies, and then the legal side of things too. So how the contracts and negotiations at the company work. I had to get kind of peer trained on that stuff, but the other stuff, you just have to come in with the general background knowledge of the industry and certain tools that they use on a regular basis. All right, was there a live question? I thought I saw someone pop up.
Yes. Hi, my name's Anika. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much for talking about your path, because I think one thing I didn't know as someone who graduated from undergrad in 2018 from a CUNY school, Queens College, love Queens College, is that you continued to go to networking events well throughout your career. And I think that was a really interesting point that not many people talk about, that they still consider building their network with the same tools that we have been told to build our network with early on. So I guess what my question is in regards to your decision to go to business school. That's a similar position that I'm in now at 24. And I was wondering if you could talk about if finances were ever an issue for going to Columbia MBA school, and if so, what did you do in order to finance that position? Did you apply for scholarships? Like, what was that process like for you at that time?
Yeah, finances were definitely an issue. Although I'll admit they were not a deciding factor, not because finances were, an ease of thing for me, but because, the resources available to me made it pretty easy to ultimately get into business school. But for me, yeah, it was tough. Like, you saw my career. Like, I spent, most of my post-college career working for media companies, freelancing, or in the middle of a recession. So I didn't have any money going into business school. And I think my deposit was probably like the last of money that I had to actually get in. So it was ultimately really just looking at all the financial resources out there, trying to explore the scholarships that they had, and trying to get whatever I could. Ultimately, I still had to borrow a bunch of money to go to business school. And, I'll admit it wasn't a tough decision for me. I kind of knew the value of business school. I knew what I was going to get out of it, and I knew it was going to be worth the investment. I think everybody has to make that decision for themselves. I know a lot of people that aren't comfortable with carrying that kind of debt. So if that ends up being the only way you can get in, you have to make that decision for yourself. I would say for me personally, again, someone who didn't have any money at the time and wasn't going to get any help going to business school, I still ultimately made that decision, and I still am glad that I made that decision. Business school pays itself back in so many ways, especially a really good business school. So, I would look at that for yourself, look at the numbers and decide, how comfortable you are borrowing whatever you may have to end up borrowing. You may not, but I wouldn't rule it out just because of finances. If you don't have to, I would really think about the long term and talk to people, talk to people that went to that school, talk to alum before you make that decision. They'll really help you, learn about whether the return on investment is worth it.
Thank you.
All right. No problem. All right. I see 2 more questions. So maybe I'll try to answer those, Dolly, and then I'll turn it over to you all. But I see in your previous roles, how close did you come to the technology side of media? I would say, I guess it depends on exactly what you mean by tech. So like in terms of being an extremely technical person, so the role at Morpheus Media, while it was a lot of consulting, I did a ton of technical stuff, helping people build their sites, their video sites and e-commerce sites. And so I did actually get pretty knee deep in that, and really trying to help them leverage emerging technologies into their web development. And then my first role in Google, I was also very technical. I was working with those products and developers to try and integrate the different Google products that we had. And so I learned a lot more about that side, worked a great deal with product as well, and was doing way more technical stuff than I wanted to be. Thankfully, Google's a place where you can learn a lot. So I learned a lot on the job and on my own as well. So that was great. And I recommend it because for anybody that's going to work in technology for a long time, really understanding that side of the business to some degree is really good. And then when I moved over to YouTube, I certainly didn't have to be as technical, but I had to talk with and work with product managers a lot. And so, to some degree, just having an experience of how they think from having talked to them much more in my previous roles, it was really helpful. Yeah, and then the last question, is there another way to get your foot in the door other than through a contact? I'm gonna be honest, there's a saying out there that it's not what you know, but who you know. And it definitely applies, especially when jobs are not fruitful. which is, starting to look like the times we're in now. But again, sometimes it's just about working hard. Like if you can show what you can do to people, if you can, work for folks, sometimes for free, sometimes for very low cost, whatever it is. If you can show your work, that's hard to deny as well. But it is, if you're looking for a job specifically, to get in a specific company, trying to find someone there is probably a good place to start, and really leveraging something like LinkedIn or your other networks to do that is probably going to be your best bet. And as long as you're constantly growing your network, the more likely it is you're going to know people that can connect you to people. And so I would say always be thinking about that, and hopefully that problem will solve itself in the long run.
That was awesome. Okay, so that's amazing. Thank you so much again for giving us your masterclass of where you started, and I have a feeling you're just kind of scratching the surface, really. So thank you so much for your time and all the prep that you put into this. We really appreciate it. Just one fabulous story about a media executive who's making their way. So thank you very much. And thank you to all of our guests who attended today. Look for next month's executive with Jonathan Skogmo, who's the founder and CEO of Jukin Media. And we'll have this video for you in about a week. And if you need anything from me and One Day Immersion, you can reach me at dolly@onedayimmersion.com. Everybody stay safe. We are in this together, and we look forward to seeing you again. So thank you, everyone.